why it would suck to wake up as a custodian. Imagine waking up one day and you're gold. Not wearing gold, not simply rich or fancy, but physically a towering, genetically perfected being plated in auramite, your very presence. A radiant golden glare that makes grown men fall to their knees and babble prayers in half-forgotten High Gothic. Sounds pretty cool, right? Well, welcome to the Adeptus Custodes. Or, as you're about to find out, welcome to a job so crushingly burdensome, so lonely, and so terrifyingly intense that even Space Marines might look at you and say, "Nah mate, that's a bit much." This is Imperial Scholar Mops, and today we're here to tell you why it would absolutely suck to wake up as a custodian guard. So settle in, polish your golden pauldrons, and prepare to learn how being the Emperor's personal superhuman bodyguard is possibly the worst career change imaginable. And hey, only smash the like and subscribe if you truly enjoy this kind of masochistic lore dive. We're not the Inquisition, consent matters here. Let's get into it. Origins of the Adeptus Custodes. Alright, so you've cracked open your eyes, realized you're about 7.5 feet tall, you weigh about as much as a small Land Raider thanks to all the metal and muscle fused into your frame, and your hair, if you still have any, is shining gold like you've dunked your scalp in liquid sunlight. But let's back up. How did you even get here? The Adeptus Custodes have the kind of origin story that makes Space Marines look like amateur hour. While Space Marines are genetically modified humans, big, mean, engineered soldiers, Custodians are something far rarer. They're crafted, almost sculpted from the ground up. It all goes back to the Emperor of Mankind, that perpetually silent psychic super being sitting on the golden throne of terror who thought to himself, "You know what I need? A bodyguard who can kill literally anything in the galaxy." But the Emperor wasn't satisfied with mere Space Marines for this role. He wanted something better, something closer to perfect. So he took the principles of bioalchemy and genetic engineering that he used to create the Primarchs and the Astartes, and he refined them, enhanced them, pushed them to levels nobody else has ever reached, before or since. Creating a Custodian is more akin to artistry than mass production. Each Custodian is individually crafted. There's no batch of recruits shoved into power armor after a few organ implants like in the Astartes legions. No. Every single Custodian has been genetically sculpted from scratch. Their genomes carefully tailored, refined, and manipulated to remove weaknesses, enhance cognitive potential, and forge a being of astonishing physical and mental perfection. Their organs aren't merely implants. They're engineered from the cellular level up. Some rumors, whispered in the hidden archives of the Administratum, say Custodians might even be partially infused with genetic traces of the Emperor himself, because that's the level of intimacy we're dealing with. Imagine discovering that your own DNA has been spliced with cosmic demigod genetics, and that your entire purpose in life is to stand watch over him endlessly until death. But back to history. The first Custodians were forged during the Unification Wars on Terra, in the brutal centuries before the Great Crusade. The Emperor needed elite warriors, not merely superhuman shock troops like the early Thunder Warriors, but guards who could protect him against any conceivable threat. Whether it was a techno-barbarian warlord trying to assassinate him, warp cult assassins creeping through the shadows, or even rebellious Primarchs one day, the Custodians were designed to be the absolute pinnacle of martial prowess. During the Great Crusade, Custodians often served directly beside the Emperor, forming an impenetrable golden phalanx wherever he went. Unlike the Legiones Astartes, who spread across the galaxy in huge numbers, the Custodians were relatively few. They weren't conquerors. They were the Emperor's shield and sword. But they weren't just muscle. The Custodians also became the Emperor's eyes and ears, his enforcers, his political tools. If the Emperor needed someone to persuade a planetary governor who was growing too ambitious, sometimes a single Custodian standing silently in the governor's throne room was all it took. Because nothing says, reconsider your life choices, like a gold giant with eyes like molten coinage staring at you without blinking. And while the Space Marines had the Primarchs as genetic fathers, the Custodians had only the Emperor himself. He trained them personally. He sparred with them personally. He may even have shared a fraction of his psychic might with them, at least to allow them to resist certain warp influences. This fostered an extraordinary bond, one that still shapes every aspect of Custodes' identity today. But all of this came at a cost, because to create the Custodes, the Emperor required perfection. He demanded loyalty so absolute that it borders on mind-obliterating devotion. He demanded warriors who could kill a Daemon Prince single-handedly, who could cut down a Primarch if ordered, and who could stand watch over humanity's future for millennia without ever doubting their purpose. And that meant sacrifice. Each Custodian is not just physically engineered. He's mentally conditioned to be utterly devoted, alert at all times, hyper-aware and capable of reading entire rooms of people like an open book. But here's the kicker. That very devotion is also a prison. A Custodian cannot simply take a day off. He can't wake up one morning and say, "Nah, lads, I'm going to try out some pottery today." Maybe take a holiday on Risa. No. From the moment of creation, your life is service. Your every heartbeat is synchronized to the pulse of the Golden Throne. Your entire identity is defined by your proximity to the Emperor and your role as his living weapon. Let's talk a little bit about the scale of sacrifice that goes into becoming a Custodian. Because if you think Space Marines give up their humanity, buckle up, friend. Space Marines at least have their battle brothers. They have rituals, camaraderie, laughter, even if it's dark and grim. They have names, identities, and sometimes even memories of their old lives. But for a Custodian, the process of creation erases your old identity. If you were once a boy from the hive slums, or a scion of a noble house, it doesn't matter. Your name is stripped away. Your past is incinerated in the vaults of terror. You become something entirely new. A piece of living gold. An instrument of the Emperor's will. A guardian of secrets that could burn entire worlds if revealed. You're no longer merely a man. You're a Custodian. Even your name is often replaced with a title, a rank, or an honorific tied to your deeds, not your birth, and that's why it might suck to wake up as one. Because suddenly, you have no you anymore. No friends, no family, no lovers. Your entire existence is duty. And speaking of existence, let's talk about your lifespan. Custodians are effectively immortal in biological terms. They can live for thousands of years, possibly even longer. There are Custodians alive today who stood beside the Emperor during the Great Crusade and the Horus Heresy. Think about that. If you wake up as a Custodian, you'll be looking back on 10,000 years of history. You'll have seen more horror, more cosmic atrocity, and more betrayal than any mortal mind was ever meant to endure. You'll carry the weight of entire worlds that rose and fell while you remain standing guard. You'll remember every mistake, every lost comrade, every heresy that bloomed like a cancer beneath your watch, and you'll feel personally responsible for the fate of the entire Imperium. Because that's the other thing, Custodians blame themselves for everything. The Horus Heresy? Custodians still carry guilt for not seeing it coming. The Emperor's entombment on the Golden Throne. They guard him every day, and yet he is still a silent corpse. The constant warp storms and demonic incursions threatening terror. The Custodians see it all as evidence of their own failure to keep the galaxy safe. Imagine waking up every day knowing that the survival of humanity rests on your shoulders, and that despite your towering power, the galaxy continues to drown in blood and chaos. Not exactly a recipe for restful sleep. Let's rewind back to the Unification Wars. During those brutal campaigns, the Custodians weren't simply bodyguards, they were emissaries, assassins, orators, and, when needed, executioners. While Thunder Warriors, the Emperor's earlier gene soldiers, were blunt instruments of conquest, the Custodians were surgical tools. They were trusted with delicate missions, persuading city-states to bend the knee, infiltrating techno-barbarian cults, or eliminating individuals whose existence posed a risk to the coming Imperium. But their greatest role was as the Emperor's companions. They learned his philosophies. They stood beside him while he forged alliances. They heard secrets spoken in whispers that no mortal ear should ever have known. This closeness forged an iron devotion that endures to this day. And it has consequences. Because the Custodians don't merely serve the Emperor's orders, they try to serve his will. And let me tell you, the Emperor is not exactly forthcoming with chit-chat these days. So Custodians often have to interpret what he'd want centuries after he last spoke, which leads to intense philosophical debates among them. Some believe in total non-intervention beyond Terra's walls. Others believe the galaxy needs their golden intervention now more than ever. This tension split the Custodians after the heresy. For millennia, they stayed locked in the Imperial Palace, never leaving Terra. It wasn't until Reboot Guilliman returned in the era of the Indomitus Crusade that the Custodians began to deploy across the galaxy again. Now, they're golden juggernauts smashing daemons, traitors, and aliens wherever the Imperium bleeds. But that shift wasn't easy for them. Because even though they're the deadliest warriors in existence, Custodians are intensely private creatures. They see most mortals as fragile, dirty, temporarily useful. They're not cruel, but they're distant. Because when you're a genetically perfected super being who remembers the Emperor's voice, it's hard to make small talk with a guardsman whose entire lifespan is the blink of an eye to you. So waking up as a Custodian means waking up into a life of terrible isolation. You're surrounded by people who revere you as a god, but who will never understand you. And one more thing before we close out this chapter, the process of becoming a Custodian can kill you. Not everyone survives the Emperor's bioalchemy. The changes to your organs, your brain, your very DNA, they can burn you alive from the inside if your body rejects them. And if you survive, congratulations. You're now a towering golden sentinel who will spend the next few thousand years wondering if you're good enough to stand in your master's presence. So yeah, waking up as a Custodian sounds glamorous, but if you peel back the golden plating, you're left with a life of relentless vigilance, unfathomable guilt, and the eternal burden of safeguarding the entire human species. And that's why it would absolutely suck to wake up as a Custodian. So, you've woken up as a Custodian. Congratulations. You've been sculpted, cell by golden cell, into the Emperor's ultimate creation. But let's talk about what that actually means for your body and your mind. Because being a Custodian is not just about wearing shiny armor and looking imposing on parade. It's about existing in a body that's barely human anymore. And trust me, that comes with some issues. Let's start with the obvious, your physical form. If you wake up as a Custodian, you're going to be big, really big. A typical Custodian stands well over 7.5 feet tall, some towering closer to 8 feet. But it's not just height. Your entire frame has been engineered for power. Muscles coiled with dense, hyper-efficient fibers, bones thicker than ceramite rods, reflexes that blur the line between thought and action. Your skin is tougher than most carapace armor. Your bones can withstand impacts that would shatter tanks. Your metabolism burns with the force of a furnace. It's said a single Custodian can wrestle an Ogryn into submission, bench press a Rhino chassis, or run faster than most vehicles over short distances. Your senses, sharper than a hawk's. Your vision can pick out a microfracture in stone across a cathedral hall. You can hear a heartbeat 2 rooms away. You can smell the trace chemical residue left by a hidden blade freshly anointed with poison. Sounds cool, right? Except, imagine trying to sleep when your ears pick up the scuttling of every insect in the walls of the Imperial Palace. Or sitting in a chamber surrounded by thousands of petitioners, each exhaling, sweating, shifting, stinking. Your hypersensitive nerves don't turn off, and that can drive a man insane. Because if you wake up as a Custodian, your brain has to process data on a scale most humans can't comprehend. Which leads us into the Custodes' mental traits. See, the Emperor didn't just craft big warriors, he crafted big thinkers. Custodians are known as the Emperor's 10,000, but soldiers doesn't really cover it. They're scholars, linguists, Philosophers, poets, strategists, historians. Some of them memorize entire treatises on Imperial lore. Others study alien cultures to anticipate threats before they arise. A single custodian can speak hundreds of languages, recall the entire floor plan of the Imperial Palace from memory, and debate theology with an ecclesiarch, before stepping onto a battlefield and personally hacking a daemon prince in half. The mental training is relentless. They're taught to analyze people at a glance, posture, breath rate, subtle facial tics. They can sense when someone's hiding guilt, fear, or treason. This is why custodians are sometimes deployed as envoys or political troubleshooters. But here's where it sucks. You can never switch it off. Imagine living every second of your life scanning your surroundings for threats. You're physically incapable of relaxing. Your mind races through 1,000 calculations even when you're supposedly at rest. Every conversation is evaluated for hidden meaning. Every door is analyzed as a potential assassination route. Because as a custodian, you're conditioned to believe that the Emperor's safety, and by extension, the fate of the galaxy, might hinge on you noticing the one flicker of deceit in a room full of smiling faces. So waking up as a custodian means waking up into a permanent state of hypervigilance. Even when there's no war raging outside, the war is still raging inside your head. And let's not forget the psychic element. No, custodians aren't full-blown psychers like librarians, but they're highly resistant to psychic influence. Their minds are shielded against warp manipulation. Their very presence can disrupt minor warp phenomena. Some say the Emperor built tiny warp-dampening resonances into their neural patterns. But it doesn't mean they're immune to psychic trauma. They've stood on battlefields where daemons tore open reality. They've seen horrors that would shatter mortal minds. And while they endure, they also remember. Custodians carry perfect memories. That sounds cool, until you realize it means they remember every face they've ever killed, every scream, every betrayal. And the burden builds over centuries. Because when you live for thousands of years, you witness not just war, but entire civilizations rising and falling. Empires they once protected crumble to dust. Friends they admired fall to corruption. Comrades vanish in daemon claws. And all those memories are still there, crystal clear every day. So if you wake up as a custodian, you're not just waking up into a superhuman body. You're waking up into a mind designed to bear the weight of a galaxy's secrets, and the guilt of every time you fail to prevent catastrophe. Now let's talk about the emotional consequences. Because let's be honest, you might think being superhuman means being super happy. Not so much. Custodians are emotionally intense beings. They're capable of loyalty so deep it borders on divine worship. They feel pride, shame, rage, and sorrow in magnitudes regular humans can't imagine, but they're taught to suppress it. Because a custodian's duty comes before personal feelings. If you hesitate in battle because of emotion, you might fail the Emperor. So even though custodians feel deeply, they spend most of their existence acting like golden statues, silent, stoic, watching. And that's another reason it might suck to wake up as one. No one understands you. Regular humans fear you. Space Marines respect you, but keep their distance. Even among the Custodes, true friendship is rare, because everyone's life is the Emperor's business. So if you're thinking you'll find a golden bestie to grab drinks with after a long shift guarding the Imperial throne, don't hold your breath. Your social circle consists of silent nods and respectful stares. That's about it. Now let's move to hierarchy and internal society. Because while all custodians are superhumans, even among demigods there's a pecking order. At the top sits the Captain General. He's the supreme commander of the entire Adeptus Custodes. His word carries near absolute authority, rivaled only by the High Lords of Terror. Famous Captain Generals include Constantine Valdor, the Emperor's right hand during the Great Crusade, and Trajan Valoris, the current Captain General, known for personally leading his warriors into the direst conflicts of the Indomitus era. Beneath the Captain General, custodians are organized into specialized shield companies. Each shield company has its own culture, its own mission focus, and its own internal hierarchy. Examples include the Shadow Keepers, specialists in guarding secret vaults beneath the Imperial Palace, containing horrors humanity must never see. The Aquilan Shield, custodians assigned to protect specific Imperial figures outside the palace, from high-ranking officials to powerful psychers. The Emissaries Imperatus, who act as the Emperor's diplomatic and military envoys across the galaxy. The Solar Watch, tasked with safeguarding the solar system itself. Each of these companies has unique doctrines, rituals, and traditions. But here's the kicker, even among custodians there's intense competition. Not because they hate each other, but because each one wants to prove himself worthy of the Emperor's trust. They spar with each other constantly. They engage in philosophical debates. Sometimes those debates turn violent, because when two custodians disagree on the interpretation of the Emperor's will, well, it can end with cracked marble floors in the Hall of Heroes. Imagine working in an office where every disagreement might lead to a sword duel between beings who could both take on a Daemon Prince single-handedly. And if you wake up as a custodian, congratulations, you're now part of the galaxy's most high-stakes HR department, because disputes among custodians have political ramifications across the Imperium. One of the more fascinating quirks of Custodi society is their lack of secrecy from one another. Their mental training makes it nearly impossible to lie to another custodian. They read micro-expressions, analyze speech patterns, and detect even the smallest inconsistencies. So deception inside the Adeptus Custodes is almost non-existent, which sounds noble. But it also means there's no privacy. Your colleagues know your doubts, your fears, your internal debates about doctrine. So if you wake up as a custodian, you better be comfortable with everyone knowing your business. Another hallmark of Custodes' life is ritual. Everything the Custodes do is steeped in tradition. The way they stand guard, the specific paths they patrol through the Imperial Palace, the sacred rites performed over their weapons, the silent, golden processions that move through marble halls echoing with the history of 10,000 years. It's beautiful, but also incredibly stifling. Because imagine spending centuries performing the exact same rituals, never blinking, never laughing, never breaking formation. Even their duels are ritualized, carried out under precise codes of honor. And that might be the biggest reason why it would suck to wake up as a custodian. Your life is an endless performance. One mistake, one lapse in discipline, and you might shame not just yourself, but the entire Custodes order. Because when you're supposed to be the Emperor's perfect creation, anything less than perfection is unacceptable. So yeah, you might look amazing in that auramite armor, but beneath the gold, you're a prisoner of your own legend. And that's why waking up as a custodian might be the loneliest, most exhausting nightmare imaginable. So you're a custodian now. Congratulations once again on your upgrade to living demigod status. Except, as we've established, it's not exactly a dream job. Now let's talk about what you actually do in the Imperium. Because if you thought being a custodian was just standing in a hallway looking intimidating, oh boy, do I have news for you. Let's start with the Emperor's Palace. The Imperial Palace is not just a building. It's a sprawling, continent-sized fortress city covering much of Terra's surface, layered with walls, towers, vaults, catacombs, crypts, and data vaults that hold the sum of human knowledge, and plenty of things humanity should probably never know. Some say the palace has more rooms than there are stars in the segmentum solar. Guess who's responsible for all of it? That's right, you. The Adeptus Custodes don't just guard the Golden Throne chamber where the Emperor sits. They patrol the miles of corridors, vaulted halls, hidden libraries, and labyrinthine archives. They stand watch over vault doors made from adamantium meters thick. They keep secrets buried so deep that even the High Lords of Terra can't access them. They oversee the flow of people and information in and out of the palace, monitoring every petition, every scroll, every whispered rumor that might threaten the Emperor's domain. They're not just warriors, they're living security systems for an entire continent. If you wake up as a custodian, you'll quickly discover your day involves more than holding a spear. Nya, interrogating courtiers who might be traitors. On, analyzing obscure warp cult symbols for hidden codes, reviewing troop movements of entire Imperial sectors for suspicious patterns, personally hunting down rogue psychers hiding inside the palace walls. And here's the thing, most custodians hate paperwork, but the Emperor demands knowledge as much as martial skill. So if you're picturing yourself striding heroically down marble corridors all day, you might spend the next 3 centuries at a desk reviewing reports about how many grain shipments vanished mysteriously in the Segmentum Pacificus. Because sometimes that's how you catch a chaos cult. Beyond the palace walls, the custodian's role has evolved dramatically over the millennia. During the Great Crusade, custodians served as the Emperor's companions and enforcers across the stars. But after the Horus Heresy, they retreated into total isolation. For 10,000 years, the custodians never left Terra. They saw it as penance for failing to protect the Emperor during the Siege of Terra. While the galaxy burned, they stood vigil over the Golden Throne, determined never to leave the Emperor undefended again. This caused significant tension with the rest of the Imperium. Because while Space Marines were out there dying by the millions to hold back chaos, the custodians seemed content to polish their golden armor and pace endless marble floors. But that changed with the Indomitus Crusade. When Robert Guilliman returned to Terra and discovered the state of the galaxy, he basically told the custodians, "Listen, Gold Boys, we need you out there now." So the custodians once again took up their roles beyond Terra, and let me tell you, that transition has been rough. Because the galaxy they returned to is nothing like the one they left. Warp storms choke shipping lanes. Whole sectors are in chaos. Daemon invasions surge from the Great Rift. The Imperium is fracturing under religious schisms, political rivalries, and endless wars. And suddenly, the custodians are back on the front lines. Smashing chaos warlords. Exterminating alien infestations. Enforcing the Emperor's will among Imperial nobility who thought the custodians were long gone. But here's the problem, the custodians are not subtle. When they arrive on a world, it's usually with the message, "We're here because you screwed up so badly that only the Emperor's personal bodyguard can fix this." Imagine the political fallout. Governors panic, administratum officials start shredding documents, ecclesiarchs stammer out prayers. Because the appearance of a custodian means someone's about to lose their head, possibly literally. So waking up as a custodian means your presence alone terrifies the Imperium, even when you're trying to help. But let's talk about the custodians as political players, because they're not just soldiers, they're part of the political fabric of the Imperium. They sit on the Senatus Imperialis, the highest ruling body on Terra. They have the authority to advise, veto, or enforce the Emperor's will over Imperial institutions. But this political power is a double-edged sword, because every High Lord of Terra fears that if the custodians turn their golden gaze on them, it could mean instant doom. So custodians navigate a minefield of politics, secrecy, and hidden rivalries. They're forced to play the game of diplomacy, even though most of them would rather be out killing daemons. And let's not forget the Shadowkeepers. These are custodians assigned to guard the darkest secrets of the Imperium. They watch over vaults that hold artifacts so dangerous they could destroy worlds. Demonic weapons, Xenos technology, forgotten relics of the dark age of technology. If you wake up as a Shadowkeeper, congratulations. You'll spend centuries standing guard over a vault door, praying that nothing inside starts whispering to you in your sleep. And here's the worst part about the custodian's role. No one thanks them. Ever. Because to the average Imperial citizen, the custodians are practically gods. Too distant, too terrifying, too perfect. They don't even think of custodians as people. So if you save an entire world from a daemon incursion, you won't be hailed as a hero. People will just tremble and avoid looking you in the eye. Because to them, you're a silent golden judgment towering 8 feet tall, carrying the Emperor's will in your eyes. Now let's talk about their weapons, armor, and war gear. Because if you wake up as a custodian, you're about to become intimately familiar with some of the most exquisite and cumbersome gear in the entire galaxy. Let's start with the auramite armor. Auramite is not just gold. It's a hyper-dense alloy infused with unique molecular structures that provide protection exceeding Terminator armor while remaining lighter than ceramite. Each suit of Custodes armor is handcrafted, custom-fit, and takes decades to complete. Every plate is inscribed with litanies of protection, purity seals, and Imperial iconography. Some rumor it's partially psychically reactive, shifting its molecular alignment to deflect blows. The result? You're wearing something that can shrug off last cannon fire, but weighs hundreds of kilos. So while you look magnificent, you're basically lugging a compact armored vehicle on your shoulders. Try sitting down comfortably. Spoiler, you can't. Then there's the iconic Guardian Spear. The Guardian Spear, a weapon so over the top, it's practically a Warhammer 40k mascot. It's a spear with a built-in bolter. Because of course it is. The Guardian Spear is both a close combat and ranged weapon. The blade can slice through Terminator armor. The bolter can spit explosive shells with pinpoint precision. But here's why it might suck. A Guardian Spear is taller than you are. Carrying one through narrow corridors means constantly getting it jammed into doorways, columns, and random Imperial statues. Plus, each spear requires constant maintenance. Because these weapons aren't churned out in Forge Worlds by the thousands. They're priceless artifacts, each with its own machine spirit that needs to be appeased. Imagine spending 5 hours each day chanting to your gun to keep it happy. Custodians also carry a Misericordia, a short, elegant blade. It's more ceremonial than practical. Traditionally, it's meant for granting a quick, merciful death to a fallen comrade or delivering a final blow to a defeated foe. Sounds noble, but it also means every custodian is legally obligated to carry around what's basically an executioner's knife at all times. So if you wake up as a custodian, don't be surprised when people keep staring at that dagger strapped to your waist. Then there's the Pyrothite Spear. Think the Guardian Spear, but with a built-in flame projector. Because sometimes stabbing and shooting just isn't enough. You also want to set things on fire. Orc WAAAGH, getting a bit too rowdy. Flame Spear. Daemon Prince manifesting in the Hall of Heroes. Flame Spear. Your own spear jammed in a column because it's 8 feet long. Well, flame might not help there. Let's talk vehicles. While custodians usually prefer to fight on foot, they have access to some of the most advanced personal transports in the galaxy. Enter the Dawn Eagle jet bike. Picture a sleek, gold-plated missile the size of a limousine with a pugger, a custodian, straddling it like some golden rocket jockey. These bikes are fast enough to outrun aircraft, armed with twin-linked weapons and capable of insane aerial maneuvers. But riding one has its downsides. Imagine cruising at Mach 3 in a suit of armor weighing hundreds of kilos. Your neck muscles alone have to withstand enough G-forces to pop a normal man's skull like a grape. So yeah, looks cool. Feels less cool. And finally, the equipment burden. Because here's the secret nobody tells you, being a custodian means you are basically your own armory. Guardian Spear or Axe. Misericordia. Pistols. Grenades. Artificer crafted armor with built-in sensors, personal teleport beacons. Each piece of equipment has its own rituals, rites of activation, and maintenance schedule. Your entire day becomes a rotation of fighting, cleaning, blessing, and oiling your weapons. Because even a single scratch on your armor is considered dishonorable. So if you wake up as a custodian, prepare for endless hours spent polishing gold. Because there's nothing quite like knowing the Emperor himself might notice that fingerprint smudge on your shoulder plate. So yeah, waking up as a custodian means inheriting the finest weapons and armor humanity has ever crafted. But it also means carrying a crushing weight, physically and metaphorically, every single day. All while hoping that today's the day you don't get vaporized by a Daemon Prince because your spear decided to jam mid-swing. So, you're awake, you're golden. You've got a spear that fires explosive shells, armor that costs more than a Titan Legion, and reflexes that could catch a sniper's bullet mid-air. But there's one more thing about your new life that dwarfs everything else: the Emperor of Mankind. Because waking up as a custodian means you are bound, mind, body, and soul, to the man on the golden throne. Let's talk about that relationship, because it's complicated. If you're imagining the Emperor as some kindly grandfather, occasionally popping into your barracks to give you a thumbs up and a mug of recaf, think again. The Emperor is, to put it delicately, a cosmic entity of unfathomable psychic might, immortal ambition, and a ruthlessness that makes planetary extermination just another line on the daily to-do list. He is humanity's greatest hope, and also its single greatest mystery. To most humans, he's a distant god. To you, as a custodian, he's your reason for existing. Back in the days of the Great Crusade, the custodians actually spoke to the Emperor. They trained with him, sparred with him. He instructed them personally, trusted them with secrets, and treated them like confidants. There are even ancient records suggesting the Emperor sometimes spoke to the custodians more candidly than to his own primarchs. Because while the primarchs were brilliant, charismatic demigods, they were also prone to passion, rebellion, and inconvenient personal flaws. The custodians, on the other hand, were supposed to be pure instruments of his will. No ambition, no schemes, just loyalty. But after the heresy, everything changed, because the Emperor fell. He was mortally wounded by Horus, entombed in the Golden Throne, a psychic life support system powered by the soul, sacrifices of thousands of psykers every day. And while his body endures, he has not spoken a single word in 10,000 years. So if you wake up as a custodian, you'll find yourself guarding a silent corpse. Or something that looked like a corpse, because the Emperor still radiates psychic power. He still guides the Astronomicon, but no one knows if he's aware, if he thinks, if he feels. And yet, you still love him, because your entire mind is hardwired to love him, not in a casual way, not like a son loves a father, in the same way a neuron is wired to fire. It's an instinct, an imperative. Every custodian stands vigil because they believe, down to the marrow of their golden bones, that they are the Emperor's shield against the darkness. Here's the tragedy. Even though you're the closest living beings to the Emperor, you'll probably never speak to him again. You'll stand watch over the Golden Throne for centuries, staring at a withered husk of a man whose heartbeat echoes through the entire palace, and you'll never know if he even knows you're there. So waking up as a custodian means signing up for a relationship that's basically the world's longest one-sided conversation. And it's not just emotional, there's the weight of responsibility, because custodians blame themselves for the Emperor's fate. They were supposed to protect him. They failed. That guilt festers across 10,000 years of unbroken memory. Even today, every custodian believes it's his personal duty to make sure the Emperor's sacrifice wasn't in vain. So when you wake up as a custodian, you're inheriting not just golden armor, but a 10,000-year-old guilt complex the size of the Segmentum Solar. But let's not forget the cosmic scope of your new job. Because the Emperor isn't just your boss, he's the psychic anchor holding the warp at bay. Without him, the Astronomicon collapses. Interstellar travel becomes impossible. The galaxy plunges into an age of strife far worse than the first. Billions would die screaming in the dark. And you know that. Every day. So imagine waking up every morning knowing that if you fail, the entire species might vanish. That's the reality of being a custodian. But let's shift gears. Because while the Emperor might be the cosmic anchor of your existence, there's also the small matter of how you fight. Let's talk about battle doctrines and combat style. Because if you thought Space Marines were the ultimate warriors, well, Space Marines are like professional boxers. Custodians are like martial arts grandmasters who've been training for 2 millennia, wielding weapons the size of lampposts and wearing gold suits that shrug off tank rounds. The first rule of custodian combat doctrine is this: one custodian equals many enemies. Custodians are rarely deployed in large formations. Instead, they operate in small squads or even solo. Because a single custodian can slaughter an entire squad of Chaos Space Marines, or hold a choke point against hundreds of cultists, or single-handedly banish a lesser daemon back to the warp. Sounds badass, right? But there's a dark side. Failure is not an option, because if you're deployed solo, there's no one to cover your back, no one to pick you up if you fall, no one to carry your body home. So, if you wake up as a custodian, you'd better be okay with fighting alone. Another key part of Custodes' battle doctrine, precision. Unlike Space Marines, who sometimes rely on shock and awe, Custodians prefer surgical strikes. They move with balletic grace, every blow is calculated, every gunshot precise. If a Custodian enters a room full of heretics, he doesn't just start swinging, he targets the leader, the psyker, the hidden assassin. It's all about removing the critical piece of the puzzle so the enemy collapses. This means Custodians have to think like strategists even in the heat of battle. Which sounds great, but it means that if you wake up as a Custodian, you can never just let loose. You're always calculating, always responsible for the outcome. Because a single misstep might doom entire worlds. And let's not forget the psychological warfare, because Custodians are walking terror weapons. Their mere presence on the battlefield can shatter enemy morale. Imagine a golden giant striding through lasgun fire, his spear sweeping left and right, heads flying, while bolt rounds bounce harmlessly off his auramite plate. Cultists flee. Traitors drop their weapons. Even Chaos Marines sometimes hesitate. Because everyone knows, if the Custodians have arrived, things have gone very, very wrong. Here's the kicker. While Custodians are magnificent solo fighters, they're also trained in perfect unit coordination. Custodes can form shield walls so precise that no blade, bullet, or warp-spawned claw can penetrate. They move in synchronized patterns, interlocking shields and weapons into a flowing golden machine. It's beautiful to watch. But for you, as the newly minted Custodian, it's exhausting. Because that level of coordination requires total trust, flawless timing, and endless training. Slip up once, and the shield wall collapses, leaving your brothers exposed. So waking up as a Custodian means training every day for centuries, just to ensure that when the daemons come pouring through the breach, you and your shield company can stand as an unbreakable wall. Let's talk about some of the special combat formations. The Auric Shield Wall, a tight phalanx of Custodians, shields overlapping, spears thrusting between gaps, unstoppable in defense. The 10,000 Strike, a coordinated charge where each Custodian targets a specific enemy leader, designed to decapitate enemy command structures in seconds. On tour, the Solar Watch Gambit, lightning-fast deep strike assaults using jet bikes and teleport beacons to hit critical locations before enemies can react. All of these tactics look glorious on paper, but living through them as a Custodian? Pure, relentless stress, because there's no margin for error, and you're expected to be perfect every single time. One of the most brutal truths about being a Custodian is the weight of reputation. You are the Emperor's perfect warrior. Your mere existence is supposed to reassure the entire Imperium that everything will be okay. So if you fall in battle, it's not just a tactical loss, it's a symbolic disaster. There's a famous saying among the Imperium's high command, if the Custodians have fallen, the rest of us are already dead. So if you wake up as a Custodian, you're not just fighting enemies. You're fighting to uphold the myth of invincibility. And that might be the heaviest burden of all. But let's not forget the physical toll. Custodians are bred for endurance. They can fight for days without rest, but even they have limits. After a week of non-stop battle, even the strongest Custodian starts to feel the burn. Muscles ache. Reaction time slow. But the Imperium doesn't care. If you fall, the next planet might fall with you. So if you wake up as a Custodian, forget about weekends off, forget about holidays. Your life is a never-ending cycle of training, vigilance, and war. So, yeah. Waking up as a Custodian means becoming the most elite warrior in the galaxy. But it also means living in a constant state of hyper-awareness, endless expectation, and crushing pressure. Because when you're the Emperor's personal guard, failure is not just death, it's betrayal. And that's why it would absolutely suck to wake up as a Custodian. So you've woken up as a Custodian. You're 8 feet tall, plated in gold, carrying a spear that's basically a bolt gun with a stabbing problem, and you've memorized every corridor in a palace the size of a continent. But let's talk about one more facet of custodian life that makes it absolutely suck to wake up as one, dealing with everyone else in the Imperium. Because newsflash, the galaxy might fear and respect you, but that doesn't mean they like you. Let's start with your so-called Imperial allies. First up, Space Marines. If you thought waking up as a custodian would earn you instant high fives from the Astartes, think again. Space Marines respect you, absolutely, but they also find you unsettling. Why? Because custodians are everything the Space Marines were meant to be, only better, stronger, faster, smarter, crafted individually rather than mass-produced. Space Marines are legends in the galaxy. But in front of custodians, they sometimes feel like kids wearing grown-up armor. It's said that even a Primarch used to measure himself cautiously around a custodian. Now imagine how regular Space Marines feel. They won't say it aloud, but there's a subtle tension. Because Space Marines were designed to conquer the stars, to be the Emperor's chosen angels of death. And then there's you, a golden sentinel whose very existence suggests that maybe the Astartes are a compromise. Yet Space Marines also admire you deeply, because while custodians might overshadow them genetically, they share similar values: loyalty, martial prowess, discipline. Sometimes custodians and Space Marines fight side by side. But here's where it sucks: you'll never truly bond with them, because your experiences are so different. You've stood beside the Emperor himself. You remember battles from 10,000 years ago that predate entire chapters. You've seen secrets that would drive even a Primarch insane. So while Space Marines might share a drink in their fortress monasteries, swapping tales of valor, you'll sit silently, unable to join in, because your very life is wrapped in secrets you can't reveal. Next up, the Inquisition. Oh boy. If there's any relationship more complicated than that between the Custodes and the Emperor, it's the Custodes and the Inquisition. On one hand, the Inquisition is theoretically the supreme authority in the Imperium. They answer to no one but the Emperor himself. On the other hand, you're standing right there. You are the Emperor's literal bodyguard. So what happens when an Inquisitor tries to boss you around? Well, it's awkward. Because legally, an Inquisitor can demand access anywhere, question anyone, and override any Imperial official. But try telling that to a custodian standing in the Emperor's throne room. Let's say an Inquisitor storms up and demands entry into a vault beneath the palace. A custodian might reply, "No." And that's it. Because while the Inquisition wields immense power, they're still not the Custodes. This tension has led to some legendary standoffs. There are whispers of entire inquisitorial retinues mysteriously disappearing because they pried too deeply into secrets guarded by the Custodes. But likewise, there have been moments when the Custodians have cooperated closely with Inquisitors during galaxy-shaking crises, because when a warp rift splits open over Holy Terror, even the Custodes appreciate a little extra psychic muscle. So if you wake up as a Custodian, you'll find yourself in a permanent game of chess with the Inquisition, sometimes allies, sometimes rivals, sometimes silent threats waiting to explode. Then there's the Sisters of Silence. Ah, the Silent Sisterhood. These women are pariahs, null maidens whose very presence snuffs out psychic phenomena. They fought beside the Custodes during the Great Crusade and the Horus Heresy. They were the Emperor's other secret weapon. And while the Custodes respect the Sisters deeply, it's complicated. Because Custodians are used to being in command, speaking authoritatively and delivering orders. But the Sisters don't speak. They communicate through subtle hand gestures and expressions. And worse still, to a Custodian's heightened senses, the Sisters' psychic null field feels like an icy void. Being near them can give you headaches, nausea, or even fleeting moments of existential dread. Imagine trying to guard the same hallway as a Sister of Silence for 6 hours, while your soul feels like it's being dipped in a cold bath. But there's a mutual bond there too. Because both groups are relics of the Emperor's original vision, a vision few in the modern Imperium even remember. Now let's talk about the Imperial Guard. The relationship here is awkward. On one hand, guardsmen worship you. To them, you're practically divine. If a custodian appears on a battlefield, every guardsman knows things have either gone horribly wrong or salvation is at hand. But at the same time, guardsmen are terrified of you, because you're a towering golden juggernaut who might execute an entire regiment if ordered. Or worse, you might simply ignore them entirely. Because the sad truth is, to a custodian, an individual guardsman is barely a blip in his awareness. You've fought daemons and primarchs. You've stood guard over secrets that could unmake reality. So while you respect the guard's loyalty, you simply don't have time to bond over field rations and lasgun maintenance. And then there's the ecclesiarchy. Oh, sweet emperor, the ecclesiarchy. The priests of the imperial cult spend every waking moment praising the emperor as a god, chanting prayers, burning incense, building cathedrals. Except, the custodians know the emperor never wanted to be worshipped as a god. So when the ecclesiarchy tries to convert custodians into religious icons, custodians respond with stony silence. They don't correct them, but they don't encourage them either. It's an eternal standoff. Imagine being worshipped by billions while knowing the man you serve explicitly told everyone not to worship him. Talk about awkward. So waking up as a custodian means navigating a minefield of relationships, respected but isolated from Space Marines. Locked in quiet wars of secrecy with the Inquisition. Bound to the Sisters of Silence by ancient loyalty and physical discomfort. Distant from the mortal masses of the Imperial Guard. Shielant witnesses to the contradictions of the ecclesiarchy. And through it all, you're the Emperor's perfect instrument, or so everyone believes. But let's talk about perhaps the most crushing reality of custodian life, how you relate to ordinary people. The common citizens of the Imperium see you as a god, not like a god, a literal god. They believe you're a living saint, descended from the Emperor's will. Peasants fall to their knees at the sight of your golden armor. Pilgrims weep if you so much as glance at them. Priests declare your footsteps holy, and children hide behind their mothers because they think you're an avenging angel here to punish sinners. Sounds flattering, right? Except it means you're utterly alone, because you can't connect with anyone. Imagine trying to talk to a scribe trembling in terror just because you're in the room, or trying to ask directions from a custodian janitor who's too busy prostrating himself on the floor to answer, or wanting to share a joke with a mortal only to realize the mortal is terrified you might execute him for blasphemy if he laughs at the wrong moment. This gulf between custodians and mortals is so vast it's almost cosmic. You've lived centuries or millennia. You remember worlds that no longer exist. You've seen warp horrors clawing their way into reality. And the average Imperial citizen? He's never even left his home hive city. He knows only the factory floor, the prayer sessions, and the crushing weight of Imperial ties. There's no common ground. And here's where it gets darker. Custodians often feel pity for mortals, because they know just how fragile humanity is, how tiny each life looks against the scale of the wars raging across the stars. They've seen entire worlds wiped out in hours. So when a mortal cries about losing his family in a chaos raid, the custodian understands. But he can't truly feel it in the same way because he's operating on a different emotional spectrum. Then there's the problem of being worshipped. Most custodians despise it because they know the Emperor never wanted to be a god. They see cults springing up around their images, shrines built in their honor, songs sung about their deeds, and it makes them profoundly uncomfortable because they know it's a lie. They're not gods. They're just men, albeit men forged into living weapons. But there's also an element of fear, because if the people ever discovered some of the truths the custodians know, about the warp, about demonic incursions, about the Emperor's true condition, it might collapse the entire Imperium overnight. So custodians must keep their distance, for the sake of the Imperium's collective sanity. And let's talk about how ordinary people react when custodians appear unexpectedly. Because a custodian doesn't just show up to deliver birthday cards. If you see a custodian in your city, something has gone catastrophically wrong. So when you stride through the streets in your golden armor, mortals scatter, fall, merchants slam their shutters closed, fall, priests start chanting litanies at the top of their lungs. Imperial officials soil their robes. Because everyone knows, the custodians only appear when worlds are about to burn. So waking up as a custodian means waking up into a life of glorious solitude. You will be worshipped, feared, respected, but never understood. And that's why it would absolutely suck to wake up as a custodian. You've got gold-plated everything, a spear that can vaporize tanks, and a mind sharper than an inquisitor's interrogation spike. But let's not pretend your life is just about polishing armor and looking majestic in the throne room. Because as a custodian, you have enemies. And not just the regular, some guy's trying to mug me for my wallet kind of enemies. No. You have enemies that exist solely to annihilate everything you've sworn to protect. Enemies that can warp reality, devour souls, or spark galaxy-wide civil wars with a whispered lie. Let's start with the biggest threat to the Adeptus Custodes, chaos. The forces of chaos are not merely an external threat, they're the ultimate existential nightmare. Because as a custodian, you know secrets the Imperium can barely comprehend, that the warp is a living, conscious sea of madness, that daemons are real, immortal predators, that even the purest souls can fall into corruption. The custodians stand as the last line of defense between the Emperor and the warp's infinite horrors, and chaos knows it. Take daemon princes, for example. These are mortals who have ascended into semi-divine warp entities, blessed by the chaos gods themselves. A single daemon prince can rip apart entire Space Marine chapters, and who gets sent in when one shows up near Terra? You guessed it, you. Imagine facing a creature twice your size, wreathed in flames, reality distorting around its claws. You swing your guardian spear, but your weapon passes through shifting warp flesh like water. Meanwhile, the daemon prince whispers directly into your mind, "Join us. The Emperor is dead. You could be a god, your mental conditioning resists it." But part of you wonders, what if he's right? And that's how chaos works. Not merely through blades and claws, but through doubt. Let's talk about Tzeentch, the changer of ways, the architect of fate. If you wake up as a custodian, Tzeentch becomes one of your worst nightmares, because he doesn't attack you with brute force, he attacks you with secrets. You're standing guard over the Emperor's golden throne, and suddenly you discover a scrap of parchment hidden in your own armor, written in your own handwriting, revealing a conspiracy you never knew existed. Is it real? Or a lie planted by Tzeentch? Tzeentch loves custodians precisely because they're so loyal, so vigilant, so certain. He loves watching that certainty crumble, because even one crack in your golden resolve could doom everything. Then there's Nurgle, Grandfather Nurgle, the god of decay, disease, and pestilence. Imagine a plague so virulent it eats through auramite, or a demonic contagion that seeps into your bloodstream and starts rewriting your cells. Even the Custodes can fall to Nurgle's gifts, though they'd rather die first. But perhaps the most terrifying is Slaanesh, because Slaanesh is the god of excess, sensation, and forbidden pleasure. And custodians, by design, are creatures of restraint and self-control. They spend centuries suppressing their emotions, living like monks. So when Slaanesh reaches into a custodian's mind, it's a direct assault on everything he's trained to suppress. Visions of perfection, beauty, triumph, bliss beyond mortal understanding, all offered for one tiny betrayal. It's not just the Chaos Gods either. Let's talk about traitor Space Marines. Imagine a group of traitor Astartes from the Sons of Horus, now Black Legion, screaming war cries as they charge at you. They're genetically enhanced, superhuman killing machines. But to you, as a custodian, they're inferior copies. That doesn't mean they're not dangerous. A squad of Chaos Marines can still bring you down if they coordinate properly, especially when backed by dark sorcery, demonic support, or twisted relics from the Long War. Then there's Magnus the Red, the Crimson King, Primarch of the Thousand Suns, one of the few beings alive who has fought Custodians toe-to-toe and lived to tell the tale. Magnus is a psychic powerhouse who can warp reality on a planetary scale. Custodians have fought Magnus before, and sometimes barely survived. If Magnus shows up on the battlefield, the Adeptus Custodes drop everything and engage, because a Primarch-level threat cannot be left unchecked. And let's not forget Xenos threats. Because while Chaos is your eternal nemesis, alien races also pose lethal risks to the Custodes. Take the Necrons. Cold, silent legions of living metal. Their weapons can strip your molecular bonds apart. Their technology is so advanced, even a Custodian might struggle to comprehend it. And worse, some Necrons remember the war in heaven, meaning they remember secrets about the Emperor himself, secrets that could tear the Imperium apart if revealed. Then there's the Tyranids, an endless tide of biological weapons, evolving to counter any defense. Even a Custodian can be overwhelmed by sheer numbers if a swarm descends, and Tyranid bioweapons adapt fast. Your auramite might resist one toxin, but the next Tyranid strain might melt it like wax. Or the Drakari, Dark Eldar who slip between realities to abduct victims for torture and dark rituals. For a Custodian, fighting Drukhari is infuriating. They don't stand and fight, they strike from the shadows, vanish, and appear again with poisoned blades aimed at your weakest joints. So waking up as a Custodian means waking up into a galaxy where everything wants to kill you, or corrupt you, or steal your soul. And some of those enemies, are inside the Imperium itself. Which brings us to the final layer of dread, rogue Imperial factions. Because sometimes the greatest threat isn't chaos or aliens, it's humans, Imperial governors scheming for power. High Lords plotting rivalries. Rogue Inquisitors pursuing secrets best left buried. And when these threats arise, guess who gets sent in to clean house? Yep, you. So while you might look shiny and perfect, your life as a Custodian is a constant battle against traitors, daemons, aliens, and the dark secrets of your own empire. And that's why it would absolutely suck to wake up as a Custodian. But let's talk about something a bit more glorious. Because even in this endless nightmare, there are legends among the Custodians. Let's talk about famous Custodes figures. Because if you wake up as a Custodian, you'll stand in the shadow of giants. First, there's Constantine Valdor, the Captain General during the Great Crusade and Horus Heresy. Valdor was known as the Spear of Terror. He fought alongside the Emperor in countless battles. He debated philosophy with Primarchs. Some even say he was present during the Emperor's genetic experiments that birthed the Primarchs. Valdor was a towering figure of martial skill, political cunning, and absolute loyalty. But after the heresy, he vanished. No one knows where Valdor went. Legends say he left Terra on a secret mission. Others whisper he still walks the shadows of the Imperial Palace, or that he watches over hidden vaults containing secrets too terrible to reveal. Imagine waking up as a Custodian and knowing your greatest hero might still be out there, somewhere. Then there's Trajan Valoris, the current Captain General. Trajan is a living legend in his own right. He's led campaigns across the Imperium during the Indomitus era, personally slaying daemons, Xenos warlords, and heretics. Unlike many Custodians, Trajan is known for being more approachable, as far as a golden demigod can be. He's deeply pragmatic. He's willing to work with the Adeptus Mechanicus, the Inquisition, and even Space Marine chapters if it means safeguarding the Emperor's realm. Some call him the finest Captain General since Valdor himself. Another famous Custodian is Ra Endymion. Ra was one of the first Custodians crafted by the Emperor. He served as the Emperor's personal bodyguard during some of the most pivotal moments in Imperial history. Legends say Ra single-handedly defeated an entire squad of traitor Astartes during the Siege of Terra. Others whisper that Ra's spear was blessed by the Emperor himself. Whether those tales are true or not, Ra's name is spoken with reverence among the Custodes. Then there's Aemon Tauramachian, a high-ranking custodian known for his intellect as much as his martial prowess. Aemon served as a close confidant of the Emperor, acting as both advisor and warrior. He often mediated between the custodians and the Primarchs, smoothing over tensions when rivalries threatened unity. But Aemon was also rumored to have a sharp tongue and a ruthless streak. If you crossed him politically, you disappeared. Finally, let's not forget the shield captains. These are elite custodians who lead shield companies into battle. Each one is a hero in his own right. Some have specialized roles, masters of strategy. Their names rarely make it into Imperial records, but among the Custodes, they are legends. So waking up as a custodian means waking up into a life of impossible expectations. Because no matter how skilled you become, there will always be whispers of Valdor, or tales of Trajan slaying a Daemon prince with a single strike, or rumors of Aemon outmaneuvering 5 Primarchs in a political game. And you'll always be wondering, could I ever measure up? And that's why it would absolutely suck to wake up as a custodian. Because even among the Emperor's perfect creations, some shine brighter than others. So, you've woken up as a custodian. Your spear gleams, your armor blinds onlookers. But let's talk about the thing no one ever really discusses. What the hell does your day actually look like? Because being a custodian isn't just about smashing Daemon princes or glaring silently from marble steps. It's also about routine, lots of it. Imagine this, you rise from your Spartan sleeping chamber, not a bed, a chamber, because custodians don't really sleep like mortals. They enter controlled rest cycles, slowing their metabolic functions, remaining semi-aware even while resting. No dreaming, no tossing and turning, just golden stillness. The moment you wake up, you perform physical conditioning exercises. Martial kata routines with your guardian spear, balance drills in full auramite plate. Flexibility exercises that would humble an Olympic gymnast. Because your body is a temple, and that temple needs maintenance. Next comes mental exercises. Custodians train their minds as rigorously as their bodies. You might spend 3 hours, memorizing planetary astropathic encryption protocols, practicing linguistic nuances across dozens of alien dialects, reviewing the tactical history of warp incursions in the Segmentum Pacificus. Then there's weapon maintenance. Because a guardian spear isn't just a spear, it's a work of art. Its machine spirit needs placating through sacred rites. You'll chant litanies while disassembling it, cleaning each component, checking psychic resonances, and polishing it to a mirror shine. After that comes your patrol rotation. Patrolling the Imperial Palace sounds glamorous, but remember, the palace is the size of a continent, and the Custodes patrol it on precise schedules, tracing sacred routes older than some Imperial planets. Every corridor, every chamber, even corridors no one's used for centuries, because custodians believe nothing must go unwatched. Sometimes your patrol takes you through the Hall of Heroes, where golden statues depict legendary custodians of old. You might pause to gaze upon Valdor's likeness, or remember the face of a fallen brother you once trained beside 1,000 years ago. Other times, your route leads you to the throne room. Here you'll stand, silent as a statue, staring at the Emperor's withered form atop the golden throne. You'll watch the flickering glow of the Astronomicon, feel the psychic pulse of humanity's dying light, and know, deep in your genetically sculpted soul, that you exist for this moment, to guard him. Even if he never looks at you again. Lunch break? Sure, in theory, but custodians don't eat like mortals. Their metabolism is hyper-efficient. A small ration of nutrient-dense paste is enough to sustain you for days. No flavors, no indulgence. Just fuel. After lunch, it's time for training duels, because custodians are always competing. Sparring matches might happen anywhere. In marble chambers echoing with clangs of steel. On outdoor terraces overlooking Terra's polluted skyline. Even in the depths of the catacombs, surrounded by ancient vaults. They're full-force combat drills designed to keep your reflexes sharper than a monomolecular blade. But here's the kicker. Custodians don't just train to fight, they train to observe. They practice reading micro-expressions, subtle shifts in body language. Because spotting a traitor among a room of 1,000 nobles might one day save the emperor's life. As evening falls, though in the Imperial Palace, evening is largely theoretical thanks to artificial lighting, you might attend a council, where you and other custodians debate policy, doctrine, threats to the Imperium. Imagine a room full of towering golden warriors, each speaking softly in a dozen languages, quoting ancient lore, arguing over the emperor's intended meaning in a decree written 9,000 years ago. Welcome to Custodian politics. And finally, before your rest cycle begins anew, you pray. Not necessarily to the emperor as a god, but in silent reflection. A meditation on duty. A moment to calm the storms raging behind your golden eyes. That's the daily life of a custodian, you duty. Chaining, ju knowledge, ji, silence. Ji, she, silence. Repeat, forever. But there's one more thing we have to talk about. The psychological toll. Because this is the real reason why it would suck to wake up as a custodian. Let's start with time. Custodians live for millennia. Some alive today remember walking beside the emperor himself. They remember the Great Crusade, the Horus Heresy, the Siege of Terror. And that means they remember everything. Custodians possess perfect memory. They can recall conversations word for word from 5,000 years ago. They remember every face they've ever slain. Every plea for mercy, every scream echoing through daemon-warped halls. Imagine carrying those memories for centuries, and here's the horror you can't forget, not even if you want to. A custodian's mind is engineered to preserve data, so trauma doesn't fade, it accumulates. Think about watching entire civilizations rise and fall. Seeing worlds you once saved turn to ashes in subsequent centuries. Remembering brothers who fell to daemon claws while you survived, carrying the weight of every failure, even if it wasn't truly your fault. Custodians also endure the agony of doubt. They're programmed to believe in the emperor's vision. But 10,000 years of war, corruption, and suffering have a way of eroding certainty. They've seen the Imperium become a theocratic, bureaucratic nightmare. They know the emperor never wanted to be worshipped as a god, yet watch priests chant his divinity day and night. So even the most loyal custodian sometimes wonders, are we still serving the emperor's true will, or just the machinery that's grown around his silence? Then there's the sheer isolation. Because when you're a custodian, no one truly understands you, not space marines, not inquisitors, certainly not mortals. You exist on a mental and physical plane far removed from ordinary life. Friendship becomes distant respect. Love becomes an abstract concept. Imagine knowing that if you ever did fall in love, you'd outlive your partner by thousands of years. Or worse, expose them to enemies who'd use your feelings as a weapon. Even among your fellow custodians, true emotional connection is rare because everyone is an instrument of the emperor's will. And instruments don't usually have personal lives, so if you wake up as a custodian, you better get used to being alone, utterly, completely. Now let's talk about existential dread. Because you know secrets that mortals would go mad trying to comprehend. You know the warp is always clawing at reality's edge. You know daemons hunger for the emperor's soul. You know how close humanity constantly teeters to extinction. Every day you stand watch, knowing that if you fail even once, all of mankind might perish. And that's a weight few minds, human or superhuman, can truly bear. And yet, despite all this, despite the loneliness, the eternal vigilance, the blood-soaked memories, because at the center of their being is a truth forged into every cell, the emperor must be protected. Which brings us, finally, to the end of this golden road. So, why would it suck to wake up as a custodian? Because while the Adeptus Custodes are the greatest warriors humanity has ever known, they are also its most burdened. They carry guilt older than most stars. They guard secrets that could shatter the Imperium. They stand eternally alone, worshipped yet isolated. They exist not for themselves, but for a master who may never speak to them again. Sure, your armor glows like the surface of the sun. Your spear can cut a Daemon Prince in half. Your name will be whispered in legends for millennia. But behind the gold lies a life of endless vigilance and an eternal loneliness that no amount of glory can ever truly erase. And that is why it would absolutely suck to wake up as a custodian. Thanks for joining me on this golden odyssey through the hidden lore of the Adeptus Custodes. If you enjoyed this deep dive and you'd like more grimdark existential crises delivered in charming, pug-themed dry humor, consider liking, subscribing, and ringing the bell for Imperial Scholar Mops. Until next time, remember, in the 41st millennium there is only war, but for the custodians there is also endless silence.